I want to thank NIS America for sending us this game to review. When I think of horror games, a few titles spring to mind. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Five Nights at Freddy's, Amnesia, Bubsy 3D. It's a genre that really picked up in the indie scene, when AAA companies were focusing more on making their titles into shooty bang bang games. But an issue I have with a lot of indie horror games is that they just feel a little cheap, at least to me. A lot of people like FNAF, but it's more like a puzzle box game, and the only fear comes from the jump scare, which I always felt was a cheap fear. The last time I played a good horror game was the first Amnesia on PC in 2010, and I think this prolonged absence made me forget how much of a massive wimp I am, because Yomawari the Long Night Collection struck genuine fear into me that other games and any horror movie have simply never done. Does that make it good though? Yomawari the Long Night Collection is a compilation for Nintendo Switch, made up of Yomawari Night Alone and Yomawari Midnight Shadows. In both these games you play as a little girl, up way past her bedtime, trying to find something she has lost. In the first title this is the girl's dog and her older sister, while in the sequel one girl is looking for the other after she goes missing on a mountain. The game is split into chapters as the night goes on, and as time progresses, the spirits that haunt the town and mountain become more frequent and ferocious. This game is one of those one hit and you're dead situations, and you have no way of defending yourself. Most of the spirits can only be seen when under light, and the only other items at your disposal are designed to distract the spirits rather than defeat them. The only other actions the player has control of are the run speeds, and the ability to interact with objects and surroundings. Interacting is expanded in the sequel, where you can hold and push objects, but that's really all. The game is very minimalist in its approach, which works really well in a horror game. When players are limited in what can be done, the only choice is to avoid combat, and interacting with the spirits, which heightens the tension. That is just one aspect of the horror though. What makes both Yomawari titles really terrifying is the fear of the unknown. Many horror games fall back on tropes, zombies being the most common, and Yomawari does have something similar, but also human-esque monsters who run at the player like in FNAF and Silent Hill. These can be scary, but after seeing so many it sort of loses its impact. There's only so much you can do against them. In Yomawari, however, almost every spirit feels new, and that makes them all terrifying. From long black ghosts to these spinning spirit light things to eyes. With teeth! Of course, once you learn what each monster does and you begin to understand the game more, it becomes less scary. But that doesn't stop the initial fear, and even when you do know what to expect, the game uses the spirits in unique ways to drive up the tension. However, I will say that the fear wasn't quite the same in the sequel. While I commend it for not using the same spirits as before, I felt the new spirits were goofier and less intimidating. The generic ghosts are a perfect example of this. In the first game, their slender figure and silence gave it this creepier feel. But the big white-headed ghosts of the sequel, with their groans, don't give me the same vibe. This isn't to say all the spirits are bad in the sequel. There are some good set pieces where spirits are used well, such as the indoor sections, which are exclusive to the sequel. The boss fights are also better in the sequel. The first one hardly had any, and they were all very easy. The sequel increases this frequency and the challenge, which is good. Another good change in the sequel is the equipable items. The first game has a number of collectibles. Some are scattered around town, some are given in story sequences, while others come from the result of sub-events in the game. Originally, doing these net you trophies, and rarely something actually useful. However, the lack of trophies or an equivalent on Switch make many of these items useless. The sequel adds equipable items that can give the player stat boosts, like the ability to run faster or carry more objects. These are good, although there are still a number of sub-events that don't really offer anything substantial. The sub-events are definitely more about the journey rather than the destination. Visually, the game's art style and isometric angle may not induce horror, but I think it's the contrary. A lot of third or first person horror games hide the horrors out of your peripheral vision, but in Yomawari, light is used for this effect. As many spirits only show up in the light, it doesn't matter how much of the surrounding area you can see. you could turn your flashlight around and be face to face with a new horror suddenly. To avoid just having spirits show up like this, the game has a heartbeat mechanic, which is perfect for generating tension. Instead of background noise, the only sounds are environmental noises, like the wind or crickets. But if a spirit gets close, the heartbeat of the girl increases, the more intense the closer the spirit is to the player. By using audio cues instead of visuals, the game becomes infinitely scarier, as the player knows something is around, just not where that something is. And that's the real takeaway from Yomawari the Long Night Collection. It is a genuinely scary game that does horror in a unique way to many of the other titles in this genre. Playing it alone genuinely sent shivers through me, and only once I got used to the mechanics of the game, and had a few friends over, did I manage to push through my fears and complete it. If you are a fan of horror titles, then this is a must-play. It isn't perfect, as many of the collectibles lack value on the Switch version, and the second game's spirits are not nearly as frightening as the first, but this is still a game that scares me, in all of the right ways. I'd like to thank NIS America for sending me a copy of this game to review. I hope that this review can spread awareness of such a fantastic horror title. For everyone listening, let me know if you've played this game before in any of its variations, or if you might be interested in picking it up now that you've heard me talk about it. Hit that like and subscribe button, and I want to give a special shout out to all of our patrons, in particular our super patron, the Duke of Dorks. A link to his channel is in the description below. With that, always remember to return to the source.